A four-star general, a hero who's briefed presidents, cuffed, and humiliated at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Why? Because of the color of her skin. This is the shocking true story of General Evelyn Carter, a fight against injustice that sparked a national movement. You won't believe what happened next. Watch now and share her story. The sun was dipping low over the jagged peaks of Montana's Bitterroot Mountains, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Highway 93. General Evelyn Carter, a four-star general in the United States Army, sat behind the wheel of a nondescript gray sedan, her eyes scanning the horizon for the faint glow of a gas station. She was far from the polished halls of the Pentagon, dressed in civilian clothes, a simple navy jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low to shield her identity. Her mission was classified, her destination a secure Air Force base tucked deep in the Montana wilderness. The weight of her rank and responsibility pressed against her chest, but so did the urgency of the encrypted briefing she was due to deliver in less than an hour. The gas station appeared like a mirage, its neon sign flickering against the dusk. Last Chance Fuel, it read, a fitting name for a place that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Reagan era. Evelyn pulled into the gravel lot, her government-issued rental car crunching over the uneven ground. She needed a signal to connect to the secure satellite network. Her phone had been dropping bars for miles. Stepping out, she stretched her legs and glanced around. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of pine and gasoline. The station's lone clerk, a middle-aged woman with a pinched expression, watched her through the grimy window. Inside, Evelyn grabbed a bottle of water and approached the counter. The clerk, whose name tag read Darlene Kessler, barely looked up from her phone. "Cash or card?" she muttered, her voice flat. "Card," Evelyn replied, her tone clipped but polite. She wasn't here to make friends, but she didn't need trouble either. As Darlene swiped the card, her eyes lingered on Evelyn, her dark skin, her confident posture, the way she carried herself with an authority that didn't quite match her casual attire. Darlene's lips pursed, and Evelyn caught the shift in her expression. It wasn't curiosity. It was something colder, more judgmental. Outside, Evelyn leaned against her car, her phone pressed to her ear as she waited for the satellite signal to lock. The briefing was critical intelligence about a potential cyber threat to national security. Her voice was low, steady, as she began the call, but her instincts prickled. Darlene was still watching, now from the doorway, her arms crossed. A moment later, a police cruiser rolled into the lot, its lights off but its presence loud. Two officers stepped out, their boots heavy on the gravel. "Ma'am," the taller one, Officer Travis Holt, called out, his hand resting on his holster. "Step away from the vehicle and keep your hands where we can see them." Evelyn's heart rate spiked, but her training kept her calm. "Officers, I'm General Evelyn Carter, United States Army. I'm on official business. My identification is in my jacket pocket." She moved slowly, reaching for her military ID, her movements deliberate to avoid escalation. Holt's partner, Officer Greg Ramsey, sneered. "We'll see about that. Hands up, now." His tone was sharp, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. Evelyn complied, but her voice hardened. "I'm a four-star general on a classified mission. My credentials are verified through the Department of Defense. I suggest you check them before this goes further." Holt snatched the ID from her hand, barely glancing at it before tossing it onto the hood of the car. "Looks fake to me," he said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You don't look like no general." The words hit like a slap, but Evelyn held her ground. "Call the Pentagon. Verify my identity. I'm not here to play games." Ramsey stepped closer, his hand on his cuffs. "You're in our town now, lady. We don't take kindly to people causing trouble at Darlene's station." "Trouble?" Evelyn's voice was ice. "I stopped for water and a phone signal. I'm on my way to Malmstrom Air Force Base. Check my plates, government issue." But the officers weren't listening. Darlene, now standing by the cruiser, chimed in. She was acting suspicious, loitering out here, talking all secret-like on her phone. "I know trouble when I see it." The accusation was absurd, but it carried weight in this small town where outsiders were rare and assumptions were quick. Evelyn's skin, her confidence, her very presence seemed to be the crime. Holt grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back as he snapped on the cuffs. The cold metal bit into her wrists, and for the first time in years, Evelyn felt a surge of helplessness. She was a general who had commanded thousands, briefed presidents, and navigated war zones. Yet here, in this nowhere town, she was reduced to a suspect. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice low but steady. "This will have consequences." "Save it," Ramsey snapped, shoving her toward the cruiser. The briefing was slipping away, the mission jeopardized. As they forced her into the back seat, Evelyn's mind raced. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, rooted in something uglier: prejudice, power, and a refusal to see her for who she was. The back of the police cruiser smelled of stale coffee and cheap vinyl. General Evelyn Carter sat ramrod straight, her wrists aching against the tight cuffs, her mind a storm of strategy and suppressed rage. The cruiser jostled over the uneven roads of Bitterroot County, heading toward the sheriff's station in the heart of Elkford, a town so small it barely registered on most maps. The radio crackled with routine chatter, but officers Holt and Ramsey were silent, their eyes fixed ahead as if Evelyn's presence was an inconvenience they'd rather forget. She forced herself to breathe evenly, her military training anchoring her. She'd faced worse: battlefield ambushes, high-stakes negotiations with foreign leaders, but this was different. This was personal, a betrayal not just of her rank but of her very humanity. The officers hadn't even bothered to verify her credentials. Her military ID, embossed with the seal of the Department of Defense, lay discarded on the hood of her rental car back at the gas station. The encrypted briefing, critical to national security, was now delayed, potentially compromised. Every second in this cruiser was a second stolen from her mission. "Officers," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You've made a grave error. I'm giving you one last chance to contact the Pentagon and confirm my identity. The consequences of your actions will not be confined to this town." Ramsey, in the passenger seat, snorted. "Lady, you're in no position to make threats. We'll sort this out at the station." "Sort it out?" Evelyn's tone was steel. "You've detained a 4-star general on a classified mission without cause. This isn't a traffic stop. This is a national security issue." Holt glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his jaw tight. "Keep talking, and we'll add resisting arrest to the list." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Resisting arrest? She hadn't raised a hand, hadn't raised her voice beyond what was necessary. This was no misunderstanding, it was a power play, fueled by the same prejudice she'd fought her entire career. She memorized their names, their faces, the way Ramsey's fingers twitched near his holster. She would need every detail for what came next. At the sheriff's station, a squat brick building with flickering fluorescent lights, Evelyn was led to a holding cell. The cuffs stayed on, biting deeper into her skin. The cell was bare: concrete walls, a metal bench, a single bulb casting harsh shadows. She sat, her posture unyielding, and began to calculate. The briefing was scheduled for 7 p.m. It was now 6:45. Her phone, confiscated along with her keys and wallet, was likely sitting in an evidence bag. She needed to get word to her team at Malmstrom Air Force Base, but these officers weren't about to make that easy. The door clanged open, and Sheriff Marlene Cobb entered, her boots echoing on the floor. She was a wiry woman in her 50s, with a face hardened by years of small-town authority. "So," she said, crossing her arms, "you're claiming to be some big-shot general?" "I'm not claiming," Evelyn replied, her voice calm but commanding. "I am General Evelyn Carter, United States Army. My credentials are verifiable. Contact Colonel James Hargrove at Malmstrom. He'll confirm my identity and my mission." Cobb's eyes flicked over Evelyn, lingering on her casual clothes, her dark skin. "You don't look like a general to me. And we got a call from Darlene Kessler saying you were acting suspicious, loitering, maybe casing the place. We take that seriously around here." Evelyn's jaw clenched. "I stopped for water and a phone signal. Your officers ignored my ID, ignored my explanation, and cuffed me without cause. This isn't about suspicion. This is about bias." Cobb's face tightened, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned and left, the door slamming shut behind her. Evelyn leaned back against the wall, her mind racing. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom now. She was fighting for her dignity, her legacy. She'd clawed her way to the top of a male-dominated, often prejudiced institution, earning her stars through grit and brilliance. To be reduced to this, in a cell in Elkford, Montana, was an indignity she wouldn't forgive. Meanwhile, at Last Chance Fuel, a young gas station customer named Javier Ruiz had witnessed the entire scene. He'd been pumping gas when the cruiser pulled up, and he'd recorded the confrontation on his phone, capturing Holt's dismissal of Evelyn's ID and Ramsey's aggressive posturing. Shaken by what he'd seen, Javier uploaded the video to X, tagging it with #ElkfordInjustice. Within minutes, the post began to spread, retweeted by locals, then picked up by larger accounts. By the time Evelyn was locked in the holding cell, the video was trending, sparking outrage across the platform. Back at the station, Evelyn heard raised voices outside her cell. The door opened again, this time revealing a flustered Deputy Sanders, a young officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "General Carter," he said, his voice hesitant. "We, got a call from Malmstrom. Colonel Hargrove is on the line. He's not happy." Evelyn stood, her presence filling the small cell. "Put him through." The fluorescent light in the holding cell buzzed like a trapped wasp, grating on General Evelyn Carter's nerves as she stood facing Deputy Sanders. The young officer fumbled with a phone, his hands trembling slightly as he handed it to her. "It's Colonel Hargrove," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. Evelyn took the phone, her posture as commanding as ever despite the cuffs still biting into her wrists. The cold metal was a constant reminder of the indignity she'd endured, but her focus was razor-sharp. "Colonel," she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "This is General Carter. I've been detained by local police in Elkford, Montana, on baseless grounds. They've ignored my credentials and delayed a critical briefing. I need immediate extraction and a direct line to the Pentagon." Hargrove's voice crackled through the line, tight with barely contained fury. "General, I've got Malmstrom on high alert. We're dispatching a team to your location now. The Pentagon's been notified, and they're escalating this to the Secretary of Defense." "What the hell happened?" Evelyn recounted the incident with clinical precision. The stop at Last Chance Fuel, Darlene Kessler's baseless accusation, the officer's refusal to verify her ID, and their aggressive detention. "This wasn't a mistake, Colonel," she said, her tone hardening. "This was deliberate. They saw my skin, not my stars." Hargrove swore under his breath. "We're pulling satellite footage of the area, and I've got a legal team on standby. Stay sharp, General. We'll have you out within the hour." As Evelyn handed the phone back to Sanders, the door swung open again. Sheriff Cobb stood there, her face a mask of irritation and unease. Behind her, Officer Holt lingered, his earlier bravado replaced by a flicker of doubt. "You're free to go," Cobb said curtly, gesturing for Sanders to remove the cuffs. "Seems there's been a misunderstanding." Evelyn held her gaze, unflinching. A misunderstanding doesn't involve cuffing a four-star general and ignoring verified military credentials. This was prejudice, Sheriff, and it will not be swept under the rug. Cobb's lips thinned, but she didn't respond. The cuffs came off, leaving red welts on Evelyn's wrists. She rubbed them absently, her mind already shifting to the next steps. Her phone and belongings were returned, and she stepped outside the station into the cool Montana night. A military Humvee was pulling into the lot, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Colonel Hargrove had moved fast, but the story was far from over. Unbeknownst to Evelyn, Javier Ruiz's video had exploded across X, racking up millions of views within hours. The hashtag Elkford Injustice trended nationwide, with users sharing clips of Holt's dismissive sneer and Ramsey's hand on his holster. Commentators, activists, and even retired military officials weighed in, condemning the officer's actions as a blatant display of racial bias and abuse of power. News outlets picked up the story, with headlines screaming, "Four-star general cuffed in small-town Montana, a national disgrace, and systemic racism targets top military officer." By the time Evelyn reached Malmstrom Air Force Base, the incident was a firestorm. She completed the delayed briefing, her voice unwavering as she delivered critical intelligence on the cyber threat. But her thoughts kept drifting to the gas station, to Darlene's accusing stare, to the officer's refusal to see her as anything but a threat. The briefing concluded, and Hargrove pulled her aside. "General, this is bigger than Elkford now. The video's gone viral, and the Pentagon's getting calls from every major network. They want your statement." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I'll speak when I'm ready, Colonel. Right now, I want accountability. Those officers need to answer for what they did." Back in Elkford, the sheriff's station was under siege, not by protesters, not yet, but by a flood of calls and emails demanding answers. Sheriff Cobb sat in her office, scrolling through X, her face pale as she watched the video loop. Darlene Kessler, meanwhile, had locked herself in her apartment, stunned by the backlash. Her accusation, born of snap judgment and bias, had ignited a national reckoning. Javier Ruiz, the young man who'd filmed the incident, was now fielding interview requests from CNN and MSNBC, his quiet act of courage amplifying Evelyn's story. Evelyn, now in a secure office at Malmstrom, sat down to draft her statement. She wasn't just a general. She was a black woman who'd fought for every inch of her success in a world that often tried to diminish her. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person who'd been judged by their skin instead of their character, their rank, or their contributions. Her words would carry weight, and she intended to use them like a weapon. The secure office at Malmstrom Air Force Base was a stark contrast to the grimy holding cell in Elkford. General Evelyn Carter sat at a polished desk, her laptop open, her fingers poised over the keyboard as she finalized her public statement. The weight of the past few hours pressed against her, but so did a fire, a resolve to turn this injustice into a catalyst for change. The viral video of her detention had ignited a national firestorm, and the world was watching. Her words, she knew, could either fan the flames or forge a path forward. Outside, the Montana dawn painted the sky in hues of gold and pink, a quiet promise of renewal. Evelyn's statement was concise yet powerful, a blend of her military precision and personal conviction. She recounted the incident at Last Chance Fuel, naming officers Holt and Ramsey and Sheriff Cobb for their actions, and called out the systemic bias that fueled her detention. "I am a 4-star general," she wrote, "but on that night, I was reduced to a stereotype. This is not just my story. It is the story of countless others who face prejudice because of their skin, not their deeds. We must do better." She sent the statement to the Pentagon's press office, knowing it would hit every major news outlet within hours. But Evelyn wasn't done. She requested a meeting with the Secretary of Defense and key congressional leaders to discuss reforms in law enforcement training, particularly in rural areas. She also reached out to Javier Ruiz, the young man whose video had amplified her story, inviting him to Malmstrom to thank him personally. His courage, she felt, deserved recognition. By noon, Evelyn's statement was everywhere: CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and trending across X with hashtags like #JusticeForCarter and #IndSystemicBias. Protests erupted in cities from Seattle to Atlanta, with demonstrators holding signs that read, "See her stars, not her skin." The pressure on Elkford Sheriff's Department was relentless. Sheriff Cobb issued a public apology, calling the incident a regrettable error, but the words rang hollow. The public demanded accountability, and the Department of Justice announced an investigation into the Elkford Sheriff's Department for civil rights violations. Officers Holt and Ramsey were suspended pending the investigation, their actions dissected in the court of public opinion. Darlene Kessler, the gas station clerk, faced her own reckoning. Her social media accounts were flooded with criticism, and she issued a tearful video apology, admitting her bias had clouded her judgment. "I saw a stranger and assumed the worst," she said. "I'm sorry." For Evelyn, the apology was a start, but it wasn't enough. True change, she knew, required more than words. A week later, Evelyn stood before a press conference at the Pentagon, her uniform crisp, her 4 stars gleaming under the lights. Flanked by Colonel Hargrove and the Secretary of Defense, she spoke directly to the nation. "This incident was a failure of systems, of training, and of humanity," she said, her voice steady but resonant. "But it is also an opportunity. We can rebuild trust, reform practices, and ensure that no one, regardless of their appearance, is stripped of their dignity." Her words struck a chord. Community leaders, activists, and even some law enforcement officials praised her call for reform. The Pentagon announced a new initiative, named the Carter Accord, to fund bias training for local police departments and establish a national hotline for military personnel facing civilian law enforcement issues. Evelyn's name became synonymous with resilience and justice, her story a rallying cry for change. In Elkford, the fallout continued. Sheriff Cobb resigned under pressure, and a new sheriff, a reform-minded woman from Missoula, took her place. Javier Ruiz, now a local hero, used his platform to advocate for community policing and dialogue. He met Evelyn at Malmstrom, where she presented him with a civilian commendation for his bravery. "You didn't just record an injustice," she told him. "You gave a voice to those who've been silenced." Evelyn returned to her duties, her mission stronger than ever. The scars on her wrists faded, but the fire in her heart burned brighter. She had turned a moment of trauma into a movement, proving that even in the darkest crossroads, hope and justice could prevail.